Hey Deckers, Marchief here, and I'm going to be looking at 6 docks that I've been playing around with the last few months, from everything from how they look and how they sit in the dock itself to the full-blown specifications of each one, and whether they work with cases or not, as well as whatever accessories that may come with them or what sets them apart from others, like the official one with the official charger as well, and whether there's any issues with blocking the input ports, etc., and whether you actually need a dock at all. So let's have a look at each of these docks in turn, and then I'll go through some of the issues and some of the extras afterwards, so please bear with me. Starting off with the Valve official dock then. Smallest one of the bunch here, definitely the most compact, and is full of features as well. So this has 3 USB 3.1, a USB power distribution port with a 100 watts max, gigabit per second Ethernet port, HDMI at 4K 60, which also supports 2K at 120 Hz. One of the only docks with DisplayPort, which also supports 4K 60 and 2K 120 Hz. It does support dual monitor output at 4K 60, but to be honest, you probably won't be able to play any games at dual monitor, as it really introduces a lot of lag, as well as not really being powerful enough. So that's only really going to be beneficial if you're doing a lot of desktop stuff. FreeSync support is still not available, however this is still on the cards, and this is where some of the features of the official dock do come into its own. This is the only dock that comes with a charger, making it the most expensive of the docks without additional storage. Big benefit of this though is it does support firmware updates directly through the Steam Deck, so when they do add that support, it will just update by plugging it in. So let's have a look at the next dock then. Next up is the iVoler Pro. This is iVoler's second installment of the dock. The first one did have some charging issues, but this one does not. It is a very sleek design, but only has 3 USB 3, power distribution for the USB-C up to 90 watts, 4K 60 Hz HDMI supporting 2.0. This does call out HDCP 1.4 support that the others do not call out, though I would assume that they are all the same here. And the iVoler Pro does also support a gigabit for Ethernet. This is the cheapest dock with a gigabit per second Ethernet if you do want that faster speed while docked, and it does have the Ethernet on the back. Looking at the JSAUX M2 dock then, this is the most expensive dock that we are looking at today, and does have the option of having the additional storage. So it does come with 1 to 2 terabytes NVMe, or you can just purchase it to add your own. Even without the storage, this is still the most expensive. It only has 2 USB 3.0 and 100 watt max power distribution like most of the others, and also supports the gigabit per second Ethernet, which is on the side. As you can see, the M2 sits inside the top here, so you can just take the spring out here and put your own one in if you wanted. But I did get the one sent to me with 2 terabytes, which I'm extremely grateful for. Also, this is probably one of the nicest looking of all of the docks with the nice metal pattern. Next up is the JSAUX contender to the official Valve dock, as this also has a DisplayPort and is essentially the upgraded version of the one you'll see next. So this is the HB0702. This supports 3 USB 3.1, 100 watt power distribution, gigabit per second Ethernet, and has the HDMI 4K 60 that also supports 4K 60, but pushes a little bit higher at 2K at 144 Hz, unlike the official one that stops at 120. Dual output at 4K 60 as well, but like I said, the chances of you using the dual output here are pretty slim. Next up we have the predecessor to that one, which is the HB0603 from JSAUX. This only has the USB 3, but 3 of them. Power distribution of 100 watts and 4K at 60 Hz as well, but this only has the 100 megabits per second LAN port. So if you are looking for a cheaper option, this is probably the cheapest dock of the bunch, alongside the final dock here, which is the ParkSung dock. We have a full review on this one on the channel as well, so do check that out if you want a more in-depth view. The largest of the docks that we've got here, sporting 3 USB 3. The USB-C cable is disconnectable, so you can take that off and store it flat if you need to. Supports power distribution on the other USB-C here at 100 watts. It only has 100 megabits per second Ethernet, but still has the 4K 60 Hz HDMI here. So really it is down to a lot of what you're going to be using these docks for to which one you want to pick up. The JSAUX ones all have the Ethernet on the side, whereas all the others have that on the back. The disadvantage for that being on the side in the JSAUX docks is there is no space for any ventilation, although the official one and the ParkSong also are solid. The iVoler Pro is the only one that gives a pass-through for ventilation here. So how does the deck sit in all of these? Well, again, it is actually quite a range. They all have slightly different tilts. The official dock here is one of the highest and one of the smallest, and does feel the least stable even when it has no case on. The iVoler Pro sits extremely deep and has a nice viewing angle. This is one of the nicest viewing angles if you have this on your desk and you're not always having it output to a screen. All of the JSAUX docks are exactly the same, so I'm just going to show you the once here. As you can see, this sits slightly shallower than the iVoler Pro, but is still very good and very steady. The ParkSong dock is the one that leans the furthest back here, and again, depending on where you have this, is probably a better viewer angle, and is the only dock amongst the bunch here that can actually hold the Steam Deck in a full case, even the JSAUX kickstand case, without too much of an issue. As you can see, it sits in nicely with a slightly shallower viewing angle, which pretty much matches the others here, but with the case on. The iVoler Pro, you can jam it in just about with the case on, but it's not very comfortable. So one of the minor benefits of the official dock over the others is that the connector for the USB-C here has an angled connector for the thumb port and is also much more flexible than the others, so it does not feel as rigid, but it sticks over the front of the dock a little bit. However, it does make it easy to just flick it off with your thumb. I don't feel like this is a huge issue, although it does make it a little bit easier for it to disconnect from the deck. That overhang doesn't look the best in my opinion. When you look at things like JSAUX dock or the iVoler Pro, they sit flush with the front of the screen, but it does require a little bit more effort pinching the sides to pull the connector out. The iVoler Pro makes this slightly easier as it has a slightly higher standing USB-C connector at the top to make that pinching a little bit simpler, but it also sits a bit higher obviously, but still sits behind the screen. So a matter of preference there on the USB-C connector. It does not have a right angle connector. It does look a bit out of place compared to the others. Something that we usually forget about here on the channel, so making sure we cover it off this time, port blocking. The input for the air intake for the Steam Deck is at the back right corner, and this is easily forgotten about when we have our docks. So the iVoler Pro here, you can see it generally sits just to the side of those vents, so the intake is completely unblocked on the iVoler Pro. And this is also the case for the official Steam Deck dock, because it sits so low and is so shallow in the dock. Even if you put it over to one side, it does not block those intakes at all. Unfortunately, this is not the case for all of the other docks. The JSAUX dock does block around 50% of the vents here, and this is the case of each of the docks. As you can see where it sits, mostly in my M2 dock, where that line appears on the Steam Deck is where that intake is being blocked. However, this is much worse on the ParkSong because it sits shallower in there. It blocks nearly 70% of the actual intake, which is obviously a little bit better when it's in a case as it sits a little bit higher, but by default it does block a lot of that intake. Of course, if you don't need a dock for extra output, then having the JSAUX tablet stand is a better option here, just to keep it up on your desk, and it folds away nice and clean, and you can adjust the viewing angle to your preference. Likewise with the kickstand cases available, this one is the JSAUX case with the kickstand. If you just want it to be propped up, then you don't have to worry about a lot of other connections, and both of those are under £20, so is a much cheaper option if you just want it to stand up. So there you have it. There is my review of 6 of these docks. If you want additional storage, you cannot beat the M2 dock for its portability, although it will run a bit hot after an amount of time with the M2 and slight intake blocking. The official dock here is probably the best all-rounder. providing you're not going to be using a case for the long-term implementation of features for the Steam Deck and also potentially the Steam Deck 2. The iVoler Pro is probably the best all-rounder here and cheapest if you just want a decent dock for a 4K 60 screen alongside the JSAUX lower 603. However, if you want to use it in a case, then the JSAUX is probably going to be a better option, as long as you're not going to be using anything too hefty while it's in the dock. Let us know in the comments below which one you're looking to pick up, and you can find links to all of these products in the descriptions below. If you want to see much more of these reviews, then please hit a like on this video, and if you want us to support more games and tech in future, please consider supporting us on Patreon. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.